Hello guys, and welcome to a how to build a strong economy in Medieval 2 Total War with myself, Langer Gaming. Today we're going to discuss how you can build a strong economy to ensure that you have a longevity in your campaign and it is sustainable. Too often people go into a purely military front early on. They start attacking the factions around them to try and expand as quickly as possible, and soon discover that they've put too much of the resources into the military and they don't have the economy to back it up. They will inevitably run out of florins and become dominated by the other factions. I'm going to show you some hints and tips of how you can make sure that your economy is strong before you go to war, which means you can fund that war and that you will probably do very well in your campaign if you follow the steps I give you. The first thing we'll be looking at is a bit of an introduction to the economies and a few major things that you need to make sure that you get right. Well, not necessarily major, but a few things that will really help as a sort of foundation to building your economy. Now, the first one is understanding the differences between a castle and a city. Generally, your cities will bring you more income. You should find that your coastal settlements should be cities. That's because cities bring more income and your coastal settlements have access to port trade, to sea trade. Now, if these settlements are castles, you're limiting the trade that you can get from the sea, and it can be a very, very major source of income, trade from the sea. So you need to make sure, when possible, that those settlements are cities. Your castles are easier to keep loyal because they have a naturally higher public order level. So you don't need as much of an army upkeep there, you don't need as much of a garrison. So there are pros and cons to both castles and cities when it comes to economy, but generally speaking, your cities will be your economy drivers. They will be the settlements that bring you the most income. We can have a look at an example between castles and cities and what source of income they can bring you and the difference between the buildings that you can create there. Okay, so if we take a look at the difference between castles and city, the best way to do it is through the building browser. You can see that castles and cities have different upgrades available to them. Now, the main difference is usually between military and economic. Your cities are generally your economic settlements, so they will be used for things such as markets and trade. So if we look at trade here, cities, grain exchange, market, fairground, great market, merchant's quarter. So all level of upgrades are available in a city for the markets. In a castle, you cannot build a market at all. So that means that you're not going to get too much road trade with a castle. There still will be trade available to you as a castle, but not a lot. You're not going to be able to really increase that level of trade. Not only that, from a castle you're not going to be able to recruit merchants, and merchants are another good way of income, as we will discuss later in this section. Castles, they tend to be more military related, so you can get the barracks and the armories, which create your strong infantry. Stables, again, you can't build any stables at all in a city, so these stables are only available to your castles. So that's just a basic introduction of the difference between a city and a castle. Cities, economic, will generally provide more income. Castles, military, will be stronger and will provide you with stronger military units. The second thing I would like to look at with you is tax. Going to be your primary source of income, especially as you get towards the mid game and your populations are growing. You will find that you'll get most of your income from tax, so it's important that you get tax right. The very most basic thing with tax is to know that different tax levels will affect your public order. So by that I mean you have 4 levels of tax: low, normal, high and very high. And as you progress up from a low tax rate to a very high tax rate, it introduces a negative public order bonus. So you can't tax a settlement that's got, say, 100% public order on a normal tax rate. You can't raise that up to very high because it will incite revolts and you will end up losing that settlement. So it's important you get that balance right. Larger cities will provide more tax income, so if you have a city of 30,000, that will provide more tax income than a city of 10,000. Of course, that's common sense. There will be some differences in production and trade, but we can see here Constantinople is producing much more than Nicaea, and that is mainly due to tax. Huge cities will still provide substantial income on any tax level, so if you've got a big city like Constantinople, even if you put it on a low tax level, it will give you a good income, more so than a smaller city on a very high tax level. So it's important that you get that production going early on and your population growth going early on, so that as you get a few turns into the campaign, you start to get a good increase in income from tax. So the next thing to consider will be trade. Now this is probably going to be your second major source of income, so it's important you get trade right as well. Now there's different types of trade. There's land trade and sea trade. These are both exemplified by these photos. Land trade will come into your market, so the better your market, the more you'll make from land trade. The better your port, the more you'll make from sea trade. As we can see here, these little, I think the horse and carts signify land trade is going on here. So Constantinople, there's trade going in and out of Constantinople, signifying a good land trade. It's worth just having a quick look at this image over here. You can see a rebel army has popped up, and you can see the road is starting to blacken around them. Now that is a sign of devastation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Ports, again, sea trade is signified by these little boats coming in and out of your ports, and this is another very good source of income. We said earlier your coastal settlements should be cities, and that will allow you to really exploit this income from the sea trade. Your roads, upgrading your roads will mean that these little horse and carts can travel quicker, and it will mean your trade income rises. So the more routes you can get in per turn effectively, then the more your trade is going to be. Devastation is this. So as we talked about, devastation is when either it has to be an enemy army. If it's a neutral one or an allied army, you don't need to worry, they won't cause devastation. But devastation is when it makes an effect on your trade routes. So we can see here that for Constantinople, which is what that settlement was, we have a devastation of 79. So if that rebel army wasn't there, I'd be creating an extra 79 income per turn. So although that's not a huge amount, if you have large armies, multiple armies, enemy armies causing devastation on your land, you can get a severe loss of profit from your trade. So whenever you see an army like that popping up and causing devastation, just make sure you get out there, wipe it out, and make sure that your trade routes are protected. I want to talk to you about in part 1 of this how-to is your governor. Now, although this isn't hugely important, it's one of them little things that you can make sure you're on top of to really maximise out your income. Your governors will have different traits or retinues. Now, some of these traits can be good, some of them can be bad. If you leave a governor with bad traits in charge of your major settlements, your major income, your major money-making settlements, then that can have a bit of an effect on the total income of that. We'll have a look at some bad traits in a minute and some good traits as well. But it's also important to bear in mind that governors with high chivalry or dread will mean that your public order in that particular settlement is better. So if it's a city, for instance, and your public order is higher, that means you've got the opportunity to raise your tax rate and get a bit more income that way. Now, if you go back to those traits and retinues, we can have a look here at some bad traits. Now, this general is in Constantinople. He's not my governor. I have another governor in there because he's not a good governor. You can see here he has the trait poor with taxes. That means that he gets a 10% penalty on all tax income. Now, if he was in charge of Constantinople, and let's say, for instance, we have a 2,000 income from Constantinople in tax. I don't know if it is, but that's just a good benchmark to use. If he's got a 10% penalty on that, it means you're only getting 1,800. Now, 200 florins is the difference between being able to upkeep an extra unit or not in your armies. So, although it may seem small, if it's like that across a number of regions, you're losing potentially thousands of florins. On the other hand, there are good traits. So in here we see we have in Corinth, we have Trifilios of Carvioi. I don't know, I'm not going to pronounce that right, but he has the trait of tight. So tight means that he keeps his money locked away. Why have it at hand when that may lead to spending idly? So he has a 10% discount on construction costs and a 10% bonus on tax income. That means that the money he makes from his settlement is maximised. So he is a positive influence on the money coming from that settlement. So these larger settlements where you're getting good income, you should probably have governors with, well, not probably, you should definitely have good governors with good traits and good retinues in there to make sure that you're maximising the profit coming out of those settlements. I think that's it for part 1. If you join us in part 2, we will go over how you can really push it out and start your campaign. We'll look at some early game tactics that can be used to develop that strong economy and make sure that you're putting yourself on the stepping stone to success. So thank you for watching. Make sure you join us for part 2, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment and subscribe. It'll help me out a lot. And thank you for watching once again. Have a good day.